I want it to be yours, she said. I need it to be yours. But Aziel, I don't know whose it is. Those words. I have turned them over in my mind every single day for 6 months. I have heard them in the shower, at my work site, at 3 in the morning when the room is dark and she's asleep beside me and I'm lying there staring at the ceiling like it owes me an answer. My name is Aziel Carter. I am 34 years old. I built a construction company from a $6,000 loan and my father's work ethic. I have never cheated on my wife. I have never raised my hand to anyone I loved. I have never broken a promise I made to a person who mattered to me. And I am telling you this story because someone needs to hear it. Not for sympathy, not for judgment, but because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a man's life isn't a stranger. Sometimes it walks in wearing your last name and sitting at your dinner table. It started on a Sunday. The most ordinary Sunday I can remember. Coffee going in the kitchen, late afternoon light cutting across the floor, the sound of Zeke's truck pulling out of the driveway after one of his regular visits. I was standing in the kitchen doorway with a mug in my hand, watching through the window the way you watch something you've seen 100 times before. Nothing remarkable, nothing alarming, except my mind kept rewinding 4 seconds. 4 specific seconds right before Zeke turned toward his truck. He had hugged Sariah goodbye, same as always, but he held it a half-second longer than a brother-in-law holds a hug. And when he pulled back, just before he turned, I caught emotion. His hand near her cardigan pocket. Something white. Something folded. I blinked. I told myself the light was playing tricks. Sariah came into the kitchen behind me and poured herself a coffee. She was smiling. That particular smile she had, warm and self-contained, the one I'd fallen in love with at a rooftop fundraiser 3 years before this night. I remember standing there watching her move through our kitchen and thinking, I am being paranoid. This is my wife. This is my brother. These are the 2 people I trust most in the world. I need you to understand something about me before this story goes any further. My father, Roland Carter, raised me to believe that loyalty was the highest form of love. Not romance, loyalty. The kind that doesn't waver when things get complicated. He pressed his hand to my chest once when I was maybe 12 years old and said, Aziel, when you love someone, really love them, you don't look for exits. I carried that. I built my whole life on it. Which is exactly why, when I went to do laundry that evening and found a folded piece of paper in the pocket of Sarai's cardigan, I did not open it. I almost did. It was right there between my fingers. But Sariah walked into the laundry room at that exact moment and asked if I'd seen her gray scarf. And without thinking, without even deciding, I slid the paper under the pile of clothes. She said she didn't see her scarf. She left. I reached back under the pile. The paper was gone. I did not sleep well that night. I told myself it was work stress. We had a government contract that had been bleeding overtime for 3 months, and I was running on 5 hours a night most weeks. I told myself a lot of things that night. I was good at that. I'd been good at that for longer than I wanted to admit. At 2:17 in the morning, Sariah's phone lit up the nightstand. I was already half awake, so I saw it without meaning to. The screen glowed for maybe 4 seconds, just long enough for the notification preview to sit there in the dark like something that had been waiting to be found. I read it the way you read something before your brain catches up to what your eyes are doing. Zeke, we need to talk. Tonight went too. The screen went dark. I lay completely still. I did not move for what I later estimated was 4 full minutes. Sariah was breathing slowly beside me, deep in sleep, one hand curled near her face the way she always slept, the way I had watched her sleep hundreds of times and felt nothing but quiet gratitude. I lay there and I counted the blades of the ceiling fan going around. I counted them until the feeling in my chest had somewhere to go. Now here is something you need to know about me and Zeke. We grew up in the same house on Delmar Street in southwest Atlanta. Same father, same last name, same cramped bathroom with a broken towel rack that Roland never got around to fixing. But we did not grow up the same. I was the firstborn, and firstborns in our family carried weight. Roland poured himself into me the way men pour themselves into things they want to last. I learned to work before I learned to rest. I learned to provide before I learned to ask. Zeke came 4 years later, lighter in every sense of the word, lighter in his manner, quicker with a smile. The kind of man who walked into rooms and made them feel warmer. Roland loved him, genuinely loved him, but differently. The way a man is proud of something beautiful rather than something built. Zeke always wanted what I had. Not cruelly, almost unconsciously, the way a younger sibling reaches for the older one's things without malice, just habit. My bike, my friends, my corner of the dinner table. I never said no to him. That was my flaw. I loved my brother without locks on that love, without limits, without the basic self-preservation instinct that might have told me to protect certain things, certain people. When our father died of a stroke 4 years before any of this happened, he left the family property to me. Not because he loved Zeke less, I have always believed that, but because he trusted me with weight in a way he'd never had to test with Zeke. Zeke didn't rage about it. He didn't make a scene. He said all the right things at the funeral and held it together better than I did. But I saw something move behind his eyes the day the deed was read. Something that resettled. Something that did not go away. I thought about that look while I lay in the dark listening to Sariah breathe. Then I thought about what my best friend Marcus had said about 8 months before this night. We were out for drinks after a job, the easy, comfortable kind of night where men say things they wouldn't say sober, and Marcus had leaned across the table and said, "You ever notice the way Zeke looks at Sariah?" I had laughed. I said, "That's my brother, man. Stop playing." Marcus hadn't pushed it. He'd looked at me for a moment with something careful in his expression and then let it go. I had filed it under jealousy, under Marcus never having liked Zeke much, under the category of things a loyal man doesn't entertain. I was not laughing now. In the morning I watched Sariah over breakfast. Really watched her. Not the comfortable half-watching of a married man going through a routine, but the sharp-eyed watching of someone trying to catch up to something they missed. I noticed the way she kept her phone face down on the counter. I noticed that when it buzzed she glanced at it without picking it up, waited until I looked away, then checked it quickly. I noticed she did this 3 times during a 20-minute breakfast. I noticed all of it, and I sat with the terrible understanding that none of this was new. I had simply been choosing not to see it. Sariah had a headache on a Thursday afternoon. She was lying down and called out to me from the bedroom, voice soft, casual, completely unbothered, asking me to grab her brown journal from the top drawer of her desk. She wanted to write something down before she forgot it. I went to the desk. I opened the drawer. The brown journal was there, exactly where she said. But when I lifted it, a folded envelope slipped from between the pages and fell to the floor without a sound. I picked it up. On the front, in Sariah's handwriting, her careful, deliberate handwriting that I had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the note she left on my pillow the morning after our first argument as a married couple, was one word. "Zeke." She called from the bedroom. "Did you find it?" I heard my own voice answer. "Yeah, coming." Completely normal. I still don't know how. I tucked the envelope into my back pocket. I brought her the journal. I sat on the edge of the bed while she wrote something down, and she reached over without looking up and squeezed my hand the way she always did, that absent, habitual tenderness that had been the background music of our marriage, and I squeezed back. Then I went to the garage. I locked the door. I sat on the floor with my back against the car tire, and I opened the envelope. 3 pages. Handwritten. And I read every word. Most of it I will not repeat. Some things belong only to the people they destroyed. But near the end, one line rose off the page and has never left me. And now I'm carrying something I can't tell him. And I don't know whose it is. I sat on that garage floor for a long time. Zeke came to dinner 2 nights later. I had invited him. I cooked. I poured his drink. I asked about his work and I laughed at his jokes, and when Sariah reached under the table and touched my hand, I held it without flinching. Zeke was relaxed, loose-shouldered, laughing easily, reaching across the table for the bread without asking. Completely at home in my house, at my table, across from my wife. I watched him the way you watch something you are finally allowing yourself to see clearly. My father used to say that Zeke walked through the world like it was already his. He meant it fondly. I was understanding it differently now. At the end of the night, I raised my glass. To family, I said simply. Zeke raised his. Sariah raised hers. We drank. Later, washing dishes, Zeke came up beside me and clapped me on the back. "Good night, bro, love you." I turned and hugged him. Over his shoulder, I stared at the kitchen wall. Love you too, Zeke, I said. I meant it. That was the part that made everything harder. I still meant it. I started paying attention to Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sariah said she was at her photography studio until 7. The studio's website said Thursday closing time was 5 p.m. I checked 3 times across 2 weeks. One morning she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. A Google Maps route saved on the screen. An address 40 minutes away. Zeke's address. I had helped him move in. I photographed the screen with my phone. Said nothing. Went to work. I called Marcus from the job site parking lot. When he answered, I said only, "You were right." I didn't explain. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Sariah came home at 7:15. "Traffic," she said. She kissed my cheek. She smelled like she had already showered. "How's the studio?" I asked. "Busy," she said. "Same as always." I nodded and turned back to the stove. The pot in front of me had been boiling for 4 minutes. I hadn't noticed until right then. I left work early on a Tuesday. Drove 40 minutes. Parked 1 block from Zeke's house and sat in the car with both hands in my lap. I told myself I might be wrong. I held that possibility like a man holds the last of something he knows is almost gone. Sariah's car was in the driveway. Curtains drawn. I sat there for 11 minutes. I counted them on the dashboard clock. Then I drove home. She came in 4 to 5 minutes later with grocery bags. I stopped at the store. "I got that pasta you like." She was smiling, putting things away, humming something low and familiar. "Where were you today?" I asked. "Conversational. Easy. Studio. Then the store." "Why?" I stood up. "No reason," I said. "I just missed you today." Something flickered behind her eyes. Fast. Almost nothing. And then she crossed the room and hugged me. Pressed her face into my neck. "I'm right here," she said. I closed my eyes. "I know," I said. "I texted Zeke on a Wednesday. Need to talk. Come by Thursday evening. Just you. Important." He replied in 2 minutes. "Everything okay?" I stated that text. Then typed, "Yeah, just come." Thursday. I sent Sariah to her mother's on a small errand I invented. She left without suspicion. I sat in the living room with the letter face down on the coffee table. Zeke walked in easy, the way he always did in my house. Then he saw my face and slowed. "Where's Sariah?" he asked. I reached forward and turned the letter face up. Slid it across the table toward him. He went completely still. "Sit down, Zeke." He sat today. The silence was long. Then I asked the only question I needed answered. "How long?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. "How long, Zeke?" He exhaled. The long, deflating exhale of a man who had been holding something too heavy for too long. And he said, "I never meant for it to go this far." He didn't deny it. I had not expected that. Some part of me had hoped he would deny it, had wanted to be wrong badly enough to need him to fight me on it. He didn't. He just sat there looking at me with sorry eyes. And I felt something close in my chest like a door. He kept talking. Guilty men always do. They fill silence with explanation the way people fill holes with whatever is nearby, not caring if it fits. I let him talk for almost 2 minutes. Then I said, "Is the baby yours?" He stopped. "She's pregnant, Zeke. She told me this morning. She thinks it's mine. She doesn't know I read the letter." His face went through 6 different things in 4 seconds. I watched every one of them. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I swear I didn't know she was pregnant." "Is it yours?" "I don't know," he said. "That's what she wrote." "I don't know." I walked to the window, stood with my back to him. Outside, the street was ordinary and unhurried and completely indifferent to what was happening inside my house. Then Zeke said it. Not to wound me. I believe that. He said it because guilty men eventually say the true thing underneath all the sorry things. 7 words. "She came to me. You were never there." I turned around slowly. I looked at my brother, this man I had grown up beside, handed things to my entire life, loved without conditions or inventory. I nodded once. "Get out of my house, Zeke." When Sariah's key turned in the lock that night, I was already at the kitchen table. The letter was in the center of it, face up this time. She came through the door and stopped. I watched her face move through recognition, confusion, disbelief, and then a terror so quiet and complete that it didn't look like terror at all. It looked like grief. She didn't run. She crossed the room slowly and sat down. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Does it matter?" She looked at the letter, then at me. "Are you going to let me explain?" I looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who had walked across a rooftop and told me I looked like the only honest person there. At the woman I had proposed to on a floor full of children and noise because I wanted to give her something real. "I already talked to Zeke," I said. All the color left her face. Then she told me everything. From the beginning. The gallery night I missed. The car rides. The way loneliness had cracked her open in a place she hadn't protected because she hadn't thought she needed to. She spoke and I listened, and neither of us raised our voices. Near the end she stopped. She reached toward me across the table. Not touching, just reaching, and said there was something else. Something she'd held for almost a year. "I was going to leave you," she said. "Before any of this. I had a bag packed. An apartment lined up. I said nothing. Then you showed up at the gallery with flowers and that note. You said you saw me, that you were sorry, that you were going to change. I remember that night. You did change," she said. "For 3 months you came home, and I unpacked the bag, and I believed us." Her voice broke on the last word. "And then you disappeared again." I stood up, put on my jacket, picked up my keys. "Where are you going?" she whispered. "I need air," I said. I walked out. I closed the door quietly behind me and sat in my car in the dark for a long time before I started the engine. I drove for 40 minutes with no destination. Then I was parked outside Zeke's house. I thought about my father, about that hand on my chest. "You're my legacy, Aziel." I thought about every dinner, every birthday, every time I handed Zeke something he needed without keeping score. I had never kept score. I had believed that was a virtue. I knocked. Zeke opened the door hollow-eyed and stepped back to let me in. I didn't sit. I stood in the middle of his living room and spoke slowly. "You're going to disappear from my life and from Sariah's until that baby is born and we know what we're dealing with. No calls, no texts, no showing up anywhere near my house." He opened his mouth. "I'm not finished." I reached into my jacket. I set a folded document on his table. "That's Dad's property deed. I've been holding it since he passed." I looked at it. "I'm signing it over to you now. Not because you deserve it. Because I refuse to spend my life holding something over a man I used to call my brother." Zeke stayed at the document. "We're not brothers right now," I said. "I don't know if we ever will be again." I turned to leave. "Aziel." I stopped. Didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm genuinely sorry." A long beat. "I know," I said. "That's the part that doesn't help." 6 months passed. Sariah and I stayed in the house. Not reconciled. Not separated. Occupying the complicated and painful space that exists between those two things. We were civil. We were careful. We slept on opposite sides of a bed that had once felt too small for how close we wanted to be. I attended every prenatal appointment. She never asked me to. I went because I had learned, too late, but still, that presence is not optional when you love someone. You don't get credit for showing up only when it's comfortable. The paternity test had been done at week 20. The results sat in a sealed envelope at the doctor's office for 2 weeks after they arrived. Neither of us called to ask. I don't fully understand why. Maybe because the question had stopped being only about biology. Maybe because 6 months of watching Sariah carry this weight alone had done something to me that I hadn't finished understanding yet. The doctor came in and opened the file and looked at both of us. "Mr. Carter," she said, "you are the biological father." Sariah closed her eyes. Her hand went to her stomach. I sat very still. The doctor left quietly, and the room was just us, the same 2 people who had stood on a rooftop and found each other, who had built something real and then let it thin out until the light came through, who had hurt each other in ways that don't have clean names. Sariah was crying the quiet way. She didn't reach for me. She had stopped reaching. She was leaving the space open and letting me decide what to do with it. I sat for a long time. Then I reached over and placed my hand over hers, the hand resting on her stomach. I didn't promise anything. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't say we were going to be all right, because I didn't know that yet, and I had made a decision to stop saying things I didn't know. But I didn't take my hand away. She looked at me. Her eyes asked the question she no longer had words for. I looked back. I don't know yet, my face said. But I'm still here. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I glanced down. One message. From Zeke. 4 words. Can we talk? Please. I read it. I put the phone away. My hand stayed where it was.